I just saw the 11 pants meme.
Nice.
11 pants?
Oh, you'll see,
yeah.
The Stranger Things subtitles are so good. Like, this season especially, I feel like
Too
they were
much
just
squelching.
wild. So much squelching, and also, like, any change in music, it was just, like, something synth.
Yeah.
Like, it would be, like,
emotional.
sad synth, emotional synth. I'm like, yeah, I know the whole thing is synth. We can leave out the word synth.
Yeah, but what if you're deaf? You wouldn't know the emotion going on.
But then you also wouldn't know what synth sounds like, so it probably doesn't fucking matter.
That's a really good point.
Not everyone was born
with the
deaf.
ableist remarks. That's true.
So they
Wait,
could,
what?
I said not everyone's born deaf. They could be well acquainted
True,
with
but for the
sound
people
of
that
a synth.
are,
Yeah,
they
fuck
have
it,
absolutely
cool.
no idea. It's like describing to a person born blind, like, what colors
the color
are.
red is. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I find it funny when they just put, like, whatever show's theme song. It's like, thanks.
Yeah.
I figured that's what I was missing as the title credits are rolling.
Stranger Things theme starts playing. Okay, great.
What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not
It sounds
make
so
this shit up.
stupid hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time.
Hello, listeners. Today's a very special episode because it's the first episode in a brand new sub-series. We have so many series now, can hardly keep track. We're starting a new series.
Yeah.
We have more than 3 series, I think.
Do we?
I don't
It
know.
doesn't
We
matter.
don't keep track.
We'll
Yeah,
count later.
exactly,
Anyway,
exactly.
this sub-series is called, I think we're just calling it Red Flags or Red Flag Movies. Nothing too special, but you probably get the gist of what it's going to be about. This is going to be a series that looks back on movies traditionally seen as, like, they're a red flag if someone says, oh, this is one of my favorite movies, you know? And we're going to analyze the movie in its own right, and we're going to both look past what might make it a red flag movie and just see how good of a movie it is, regardless of how some people interpret the movie. And we're also going to, of course, acknowledge why it has become a red flag movie.
It's usually
a little mixture
so
of both.
obvious.
Oh yeah, I mean they're gonna be obvious, but we'll talk about it for sure. So the first episode today is gonna be on the quintessential red flag movie, arguably.
Yeah.
American Psycho, which was 1999 or 2000, one of those.
2000.
2000.
2000. All right, and it's starring Christian Bale. Probably one of his like first breakout roles, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine. So we're going to jump right into that right now. We have some intros for that. I'll let you guys take it away.
Sure. Carol, you want to go first?
Yeah. So as Dan mentioned, American Psycho is a film starring Christian Bale. It's a satirical horror film where he is playing a Wall Street bro in the 80s, aka what they would call a yuppie back in the day. I don't know if that term is still used at all, but it is in all the descriptions of the film online. It's a nickname for a young urban professional, just so everyone knows. And he's also possibly, spoiler alert, a serial killer named Patrick Bateman, which is a name I'm sure you've heard of whether you've seen the film or not, because you've probably encountered some asshole at a party dressed in a ketchup-covered raincoat. But the film is based on a 1991 novel of the same title by Bret Easton Ellis, and The film was eventually, we can get into the mess it was to make this film made, but eventually was directed by Mary Herron and also stars Willem Dafoe, Jared Leto, our favorite, Justin Theroux, Josh Lucas, who I fully didn't recognize and should have because he was in Sweet Home Alabama. And speaking of Sweet Home Alabama, this film also has Reese Witherspoon and a couple of other women who are all either, once again, spoiler alert, killed or almost killed or traumatized. And that's all I have to say about this film.
Okay, my turn. Here we go. Let me pull it up. Sorry, I should have had this ready. I don't know why I didn't have this ready the whole time you were talking.
You're just
You know how easy it is to edit the space between the end of hers and the beginning of yours?
No, leave it all in. Just dead air.
Embarrass Marco.
All right. My name is Marco Guarini, and I am a co-host of the Feature Length Podcast. Before every episode, I do an immense amount of prep. First, I start by opening my branded notebook and dating the page I'm going to write on. I then queue up the movie I'm going to watch and begin to make myself a podcast prep snack. Normally, I make myself a nice vanilla and chamomile tea. 2 bags left in the cup with a teaspoon of honey. I don't add milk, as milk is bad for digestion, and normally I'm prepping for the movie at night. If I'm feeling famished, I might include some Ritz crackers and Genoa salami. Genoa salami is the predominant salami eaten by Italians, as it comes from the Genoa region of Italy. Cold cuts are a great late-night snack as they're pure protein and won't spike your insulin levels before bed. With my snacks prepared, I can finally take notes for the movie I'm watching, being sure to carefully keep track of any lines of dialogue that particularly tickle my fancy. There is an idea of a feature-length podcast, an abstraction, but there is no real podcast, only an entity, something illusory, and though we can add an intro and outro and you can download our episodes, and maybe you can even sense the hosts have lifestyles comparable to yours, we simply are not there. This podcast means nothing. All right. Thank you.
I don't disagree with any of that.
That last sentence.
I think it's right on the money, to be honest with you.
Okay, is that fact about the cold cuts before bed true?
Yeah.
That's genius. Back in my meat eating days, the amount of times I had cold cuts as a before bed snack and I thought I was fucking myself up, I'm so happy to know I wasn't.
Apparently it is like the healthiest one because it's protein so it doesn't spike your insulin and it's just way better for you if you're gonna eat anything before bed, but technically you're not supposed to eat like 3 hours before you go to sleep, but fuck that. I do it all the time. Fuck that noise.
Also, I've never heard of the combination of Ritz crackers and Genoa salami before.
Delicious. I'll tell you. It's a poor man's charcuterie board, but it is delicious.
Have you tried it with other crackers, or is Ritz just your go-to?
No, I mean, I'll use any salty cracker I got around, but normally it's Ritz crackers. Because also sometimes I get like the cheesy Ritz crackers, not like the plain Ritz crackers, and then it's like a whole other...
Did you expect your routine to be this dissected by us after you read the intro?
Nope.
I'm just so curious. Another spoiler. Don't spoil it, guys.
This movie is 22 years old.
Yeah, I know.
It's almost as old as us.
Almost. Just about. Alright, we can talk about this thing?
No.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Feature Length Podcast.
Like you said, this podcast is nothing, so...
Yeah, that's true. Shall we start in, I guess, ascending order of times watched? So, like, Dan, Carol, me, or do we want to go me, Carol, Dan? Descending order.
Oh.
It's up to you guys. I don't really care.
I feel like you're going to have the most to say because you've watched it the most.
Probably.
So I'll go first.
Okay,
if that's okay.
Yeah.
So this is my first time watching it for this. And obviously I was aware of its cultural presence as a red flag movie. I think that's mostly why, like, I've had Netflix for a while and I've constantly seen it on Netflix, but I've always just bypassed it, mostly for that reason of just like, oh, it's American Psycho, it's that movie. And I'd heard that it was, if you look past that, it's actually a good movie. So I was excited to, our first episode for the Red Flag series. Oh, American Psycho. I can finally have an excuse to watch this movie,
There you go.
I can blame, if nothing else, I can blame it on the podcast. That's why, if it all goes to shit, I watched it for this and nothing else.
Just don't go around saying it's your favorite. That's all.
Yeah. And on that note, I have to admit, I didn't really like the movie. I thought it was hilarious.
Okay, good.
But I have a question. Was it supposed to be funny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about it. But don't, as long as you found it hilarious.
I found it absolutely hilarious, but I was laughing at the movie.
Okay. But I also think you're supposed to, which I'll get into because
Okay.
I had a similar reaction. But keep going.
Yeah, so we'll get back to that. But I would say, I don't know, from a storytelling perspective, I didn't really find it fulfilling. Like, I didn't feel like the character gets his comeuppance in the way that he should. It's just kind of... I think it's like in line with why a lot of stupid people glorify this movie. Like, the character doesn't really... He's too much of a protagonist. Or he's too much of a glorified protagonist in the movie, I think. And I know the movie is clearly pointing out that he's a shitty person, but he doesn't, in my opinion, he doesn't learn a big enough lesson by the end of the movie. And you know, I've only watched this once. I'm sure you two will point out maybe things that I didn't even notice or whatever. But yeah, I was kind of a little bit disappointed because I was expecting, like, from my experience, the movie was just kind of like an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes, whatever, of this guy doing horrible things, and then it just kind of ends. And there's that little twist we'll talk about at the end, which I don't fully understand, and we'll get into. Sorry?
I said me either.
Okay. But I just would have liked some more progression. It felt like the plot kind of felt like a flat line of, like, the same things happening over and over again. But I won't say too much more right now, so I'll pass it off. But those are my general first thoughts.
Yeah, so I have seen this film once before, and so I rewatched it for this podcast. I first saw it maybe a year or two ago around Halloween time because I just wanted something vaguely spooky, and I didn't know anything about it except the fact that it's a well-known film and, like, horror-esque, or just, like, there's a killer in it, so it makes it spooky adjacent. And I didn't even know it was a red flag movie when I watched it, to be honest, because that's how little I knew of the plot. But so I went into it with an open mind, which is good. And I don't remember having really strong feelings in either direction, neither negative or positive, upon that first viewing. I just remember thinking, like, okay, I get why this is a unique film that people talk about to this day. I did find it, humorous. I liked kind of the addition of pop music as such an integral part of the plot and his personality. That goes against his portrayed version of himself that he shows other people. It seems like the music's kind of a secret thing, which I found really interesting. So yeah, there's a lot to dissect, and I'm sure we'll get to it. But yeah, I didn't really remember it a year later, to be honest. So then when you guys brought it up, I knew I would have to rewatch it. And it, other than knowing upon this watching the basic plot points, and since then realizing that it is a red flag movie, so I had that kind of lens when I watched it, and obviously I very much understand why anyone who likes it is a red flag, obviously. And I will say, for some reason this time watching, all of the violence against the women felt harder to watch than the first time. I don't remember how well, like, if I was paying attention really well the first time I watched it, but this time it did make me a lot more uncomfortable. But everyone's performances were really good, and that's probably the main thing I'm taking from this movie.
Okay,
Marco?
my turn?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen this 3 times now. This is my 3rd time for the podcast. The first time I watched it was kind of similar circumstances to yours, Carol, but not like, it wasn't 2 years ago. It was probably about 6 years ago now. But it was a similar idea. I think Maddie and I were just looking for a horror movie, and we mistakenly watched this thinking it was a horror movie, and I fucking hated it. And I walked out of it being like... Yeah. And that was totally, like, I totally acknowledge, like, that was me hating that it wasn't what I thought it would be, because I was like, this is stupid, this is not a horror movie, whatever. Then probably now a year ago, I was watching movies with my sister, and we had just finished Goodfellas, funny enough, which I'm going to bring back up this comparison, but we had just finished Goodfellas, and we were just going through Netflix, and she was like, "Oh, I've always wanted to see American Psycho," and I was like, "Okay, fine." I don't remember liking it, but maybe I was a dumbass. And I watched it, and I still didn't love it or anything, but I understood it more on that second watch, and I was like, I guess appreciated it for what it was or what I was getting out of it on that viewing. And then this most recent rewatch has by far been the most I've enjoyed it of any of the times I've watched it, and I think it's because I finally settled into what the movie was trying to do, because it is a very weird movie, but also weird on purpose, and I think it needs to like you need to be like beaten down by it enough times until you finally like accept it for what it's doing, and then I think you can
great film.
Enjoy it for what it's doing. And yeah, I mean, we'll get into it. Like so Dan, let's talk right away about the humor side of it. I think it is humorous on purpose because I think the central like idea of the whole movie, it's so funny because the movie is like polar opposites with itself, because it is like a character study. Like fucking Patrick Bateman is in every scene. We are constantly with Patrick Bateman. Except for one. But at the same time, even though it like presents itself as a character study, Patrick Bateman, at least what I got out of it on this most recent rewatch, is like just a stand-in for the idea of like what capitalism does to shitty men. Like, if you watch this movie from that point of view, the whole movie is essentially just like roasting shitty men that benefit off of capitalism, and it's about them abusing their power and how they are nothing people with nothing to add. And like even going to, so we talked about like the music stuff, which again is like funny, like that he's like, but it's also like you think about like the music scenes make me so sad because it's basically what we do on this podcast, where they're picking like he's picking like the most famous pop culture albums of the time and being like, hey, I'm saying something insightful about this, and all he's saying is just regurgitated nonsense and it's like he's trying to analyze it as if it's high art and it's fucking Phil Collins or it's, you know, Huey Lewis and the News. No. I'm not saying I don't like those people, but what I'm saying is
I think I know what you're saying.
It would be like me coming on this podcast and being like, the Sam Raimi movies are The Godfather. You know what I mean? Like,
concerned that when you were trying to say that they aren't high art, the first name that came to mind was Phil Collins.
No,
I think that's unfair.
I love Phil Collins. I think Phil Collins, more so than Huey Lewis in the News, makes like legitimately good music.
I laughed when he was listening to I'm Walking on Sunshine.
Yeah, that was great. That was fantastic.
But I think also here's what I have to say about the music stuff.
Okay, go for it.
It was at least refreshing that it wasn't classical music.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that has been so, I don't know, like maybe it could also be that this movie, like I hated that he was also a music snob on top of everything else because it's so like stereotypical. And it might be that this movie started that trope. I don't know, because this is 22 years old now, but I feel like every like psychopathic antagonist character is like a music snob in everything ever. But at least it wasn't, it's always classical music, and in this at least it was just like pop music.
Yes,
at least it shook it up in that
a little bit, and
yeah.
I do appreciate that. And I think it's one of those things of this movie did it, and then everything else was like, oh, Psychopath has to like
that's
music.
What I'm thinking, yeah.
But the people that were imitating it didn't really understand that him liking music in this was not supposed to be a one-to-one of Psychopath's liking music. Like, it's very deliberate that the music he likes is just part of the machine of like society, and like that's all he understands is like he interprets his life through that shit. Yeah, so I don't know, like I got way more out of it this time viewing it through that lens, and I think part of the reason why, up to our rewatch of this as well, it's so funny, the TikTok algorithm, it really gets you. But I kept seeing all these TikToks being like, isn't it weird that American Psycho was written and directed by women? And I was like,
I thought the same thing.
Oh,
yeah.
I never even knew that. That's weird. That like the quintessential red flag movie. And then I think watching it from that lens, and it really made like the humor make sense to me, and like Christian Bale's performance makes sense. Where I'm like, oh, this is like a fuck you to this type of men, which is also hilarious that then so many guys are like, Oh, Patrick Bateman, isn't he so sick, bro? Like, he's so jacked, and look at his morning routine, and like
completely taking it the entire wrong way,
completely over the head, right? So yeah, that is how I learned. You know, there's that movie title, that like really famous movie title that's like How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb or whatever.
Stanley Kubrick movie.
Of course it was Stanley.
It's Doctor Strangelove.
Doctor Strangelove.
Alternate title, yeah.
This rewatch, I'm thinking of it as like how I learned to stop expecting this to be a horror movie and love it for being just like making fun of shitty men that like benefit off of other people. But yeah, I mean, I completely understand obviously how it would be interpreted to be a red flag movie and all that. And I know we didn't really do like recommends, but I mean, Carol, to your point, yeah, like I think the violence against the women, not even like the murder violence, I was like, okay, this is like all murder violence against women, but like the sex stuff was like particularly not
and
enjoyable.
That was where they chose to be really like explicit.
Yeah.
And every time it was a death, it was usually like him, you know, lifting a saw above his head, and then it would cut before he brought it down type deal. But for some reason, when it came to the like rape and rape murder combos, they're like, nah, we can show everything. And I was like, this is an interesting choice from people who say they wanted to make a feminist take on this not feminist novel, but go off.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also, again, yeah, like to your point, like to have women directing it feels a little odd. And but I also like, we've talked so much about this, about how much what would be like progressive in the year 2000 is obviously not progressive anymore. And like at the time, I think there's an argument to be made that like maybe them choosing to hang a lantern, you don't hang a candle, you hang a lantern. them choosing to hang a lantern on like the rape stuff specifically was probably like a deliberate choice to be like, no, we're trying to say something about this and about this type of men. Whereas obviously now, you know, when we've had the conversation on other episodes before about like maybe you just shouldn't ever show that stuff explicitly. Like maybe there's other ways to go around it.
Also, I know that sounds horrible and is just really highlighting how cynical I am at this point in time, but my initial thought as to why they showed more of the sex and rape than the actual murder is because they had issues in the development of this, changing it from an NC-17 to an R. And the novel itself, which we can talk about more later, was a lot more graphic and had a lot more murders and rapes and other things. And so I don't know if this is actually true, but in my mind, for some reason, I think that like sex would be more acceptable than more brutal graphic murders in terms of changing the rating. I don't know if that's actually true, but I don't know if that played a factor at all.
That's interesting. I mean, it definitely could be. I don't know one way or another either. But I have heard I've heard very funny stories about shit people have had to do to get the ratings on their movie changed. Like, so I would not be surprised if that was a factor. But yeah, I don't know. It's just that scene is so long and drawn out and so uncomfortable that to me it feels like such like a. It's like such a pillar of the movie, like where it sits in the movie, where it's like, oh my fucking god, that like I have to imagine. It doesn't feel as much like a studio thing, only because of how long and drawn out it is. Whereas like normally like a studio thing would be like, can you add a scene where this happens, and it's like some quick stupid fucking scene that it's like, why? It's like the scene at the end of Batman when Joker and fucking Riddler talk. Like that is to me, whereas this feels like it was deliberate. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, even in the script writing phase, potentially it could have been like the studios maybe having something to say about the type of violence that was included in the movie. I got no idea about the history because, like I said, all I did to prep was make tea and watch the movie. So I really don't know that much about the backstory.
I have a question about the novel. Real quick. So was the novel written in the same lens as this movie, or was it supposed to be glorifying the character?
From my understanding, Carol, you can hit us with the facts. I believe the novel is just a straight up like horror novel. Like it's kind of like it's just about a psychopath man that kills people. I don't think it's supposed to be like a feminist critique on.
So the novel is like how people who glorify this movie think the movie is?
Yeah, basically. How people that are missing the point,
Well, the novel is similar to the movie in that Patrick Bateman is our unreliable narrator. So it has the same twist at the end where it's like a did he murder all these people or not? There's just a lot more murder and death and a lot more overt racism and sexism and just general horrible things said and done. But what I found really interesting is what the author said about his inspiration for the novel and more specifically the character. And it kind of makes me... I don't know how I feel. We'll talk about it after. Okay. But the quote is, Bateman was crazy the same way I was. He did not come out of me sitting down and wanting to write a grand sweeping indictment of yuppie culture. It initiated because of my own isolation and alienation at a point in my life.
My God.
I was living like Patrick Bateman. I was slipping into a consumerist kind of void that was supposed to give me confidence and make me feel good about myself, but just made me feel worse and worse and worse about myself. That is where the tension of American Psycho came from. It wasn't that I wasn't going to make up the serial killer on Wall Street. High concept, fantastic. It came from a much more personal place, and that's something that I've only been admitting in the last year or so. I was so on the defensive because of the reaction to the book that I wasn't able to talk about it on that level. So it seems like his justification for it is that it is still generally a scathing hot take on how evil capitalism is. But I just think this is one way to tackle that subject, and I don't know how helpful it is to anyone.
I don't know. It sounds to me like he was just being a shitty person and wrote a book to excuse a lot of
correct.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so when I read that quote, I was like, oh, okay, I don't think any part of me can like this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, like I said before, like, I can get behind this movie, because it's like you said of...
Yeah.
The movie version is a complete satire of this lifestyle. But my one problem that still remains is he doesn't, like, explicitly... Like, he needs to be arrested at this movie.
Yeah.
Or die. Either one of those things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we can jump right to it, as we often do, but the ending...
We should, actually, because I want to talk about the ending, because it'll, like, that defines how I interpret what exactly happened in this movie.
Let's definitely talk about it. I think the ending for me is also my least favorite part of the movie, and I think it's because the movie is constantly fluctuating in this area of, like, is it a... like psycho serial killer thing like the book, or is it like a critique, and I think a vast majority of the movie does a good job of being silly and like poking fun at it's almost like can you imagine buying the rights to a book and making an entire movie that's just like a fuck you to the book in a way? Like that's what so much
that's been done before, I think.
That is what so much of this movie is until the end, where it then, I think...
turns into the book.
Just becomes the very literal plot thing of like, ooh, the big twist, and then it ends, and it's kind of like, okay, so, yeah, like, I have read, and, like, watched video essays or whatever about how the ending, I guess, there's, like, a line that he says about how, like, even though, like, I've confessed all this... like, it means nothing. Like, I'm never gonna get my punishment, and how, like, him not getting his punishment is his punishment.
Yeah, that was, like, that epitomized my problem of how he literally looked in the camera and stated that he learned nothing.
Yeah. Like, that is also my problem. Is, like, I just... like, why keep that? Like, if you're gonna change the lens of which we're telling this story, why keep this ending that also doesn't feel like an ending? Like, it just sort of feels like...
well, there was an American Psycho 2.
Yeah, we're not the Mila Kunis movie?
Yeah.
So was that a reboot, or was that, like, an actual sequel? Do we know anything about that?
Well, Mila Kunis didn't know it was supposed to be any way related to American Psycho 1 when she made it, and really regrets making it. So I don't really know how it was actually supposed to be related. Mila Kunis wasn't even sure.
My understanding, and I may have heard this on a podcast somewhere, I don't know. I don't have the source. My understanding was that it was just a completely separate horror movie that the studio had no faith in, and so they called it American Psycho 2.
One of those, okay.
Because American Psycho was a brand at the time. Kind of like 10
Star Wars.
Cloverfield Lane. Or Star Wars. Yeah, I guess Star Wars as well. Yeah. So that's my understanding of American Psycho 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Die Hard. All the Die Hard sequels are just other movies they turned into Die Hard.
Well, Cloverfield is a good example that you brought up.
That's it.
There's no connection between those movies.
They just love to do that shit.
Yeah. Anyway, back to what you were saying, though. So about this twist at the end.
Yeah.
Because upon watching the end, which, by the way, like, okay, the end of this movie, in my opinion, felt like the end of the second act.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
that twist happens, and then there should have been, like, a last act following through on what's going to happen to him, whatever.
Yep.
But rewinding a little bit to the scene at the ATM, which, in my opinion, is the most unhinged scene in this entire movie, and that's saying something.
I always drop off at that point.
That's where I dropped off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he goes from just like taking out money at this ATM to holding a gun to a stray cat that he finds to a random old lady walking up and saying, "Hey, what are you doing there?" And he kills her, and then he runs from the cops and explodes like 2 cop cars.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
In like the
just a
span of
gun.
what, 5 minutes?
Yeah.
With a pistol. And that's where I started, like, I was genuinely thinking, this has to be a dream sequence, right?
Yeah.
This can't be real. From the fact alone that he blew up the cars with a pistol. Like, how does that make any sense? And even the way, like, he never got shot at all. He was just standing there, no cover, shooting at a bunch of cops and succeeding. So that's where I started to think, well, not started to think, I also noticed throughout the movie of how there were lots of moments where he'd like say a very sketchy line, and no one would seem to notice, even though they seem to be within earshot. Like the first example is at the beginning of the movie with the bartender.
Yeah.
And then there's another example where he's like, oh, it's when he's breaking up with Reese Witherspoon, and he says like he openly admits to something homicidal. Like I don't remember what the line was, but he
says something
says
about
out
how
loud.
A small amount of murder isn't doing it for him anymore, and he needs to
something like that.
kill him.
Well, there's also like the murders and something line, and then she goes, "Oh, mergers and acquisitions." Like that was another scene. So like it happens a bunch through it.
And then there's also, I don't know if this is like supposed to be a joke or, but the scene where he almost kills his receptionist. I don't remember
her name.
Her. And then he's like you should leave. I don't want to hurt you.
Yeah.
And she takes it as like I don't want to get hurt in
Emotional.
bed. Well, I thought that too, but she was like, yeah, I don't want to be like bruised or anything. So I was like, did she think that he meant like he's gonna be rough during sex or something because his ex called? So all these things together, I was like, okay, something beyond the literal is going on here.
Yeah.
But then it all culminated for me in that ATM cop chase scene where I was like, this is just fantastical at this point. So, like, what do you think as someone who's seen it 3 times? Like, what happened and what didn't happen in your opinion?
Okay, so first of all, let me just say there's an entire subgenre dedicated on YouTube to just talking about what the fuck actually happened in this movie.
Yeah, do we know if there is a correct canonical, like, this is what happened, this isn't, or is it just kind of up to your own interpretation?
I think it's up to interpretation. So I am
it is.
gonna give you the interpretation that makes sense to me, because I think there are enough clues to make this a legit interpretation. And it's not just like fan theory. Like, there's clues in the movie. But my takeaway about all of this is basically that all the horror movie stuff that happens is his delusions. And my takeaway on that is, first of all, most of it is completely unrealistic, and he would have been caught, number one, for any of it. Especially the ending. You guys talk about the ending, but there's way more shit before that where he definitely would have been caught.
I mean, Oh, this is another... Sorry, I'll let you get back to it in one sec. But this is another thing that kind of threw me off was there was this whole investigation going on with Paul Allen, played by everyone's favorite Jared Leto, by the way.
Best scene in the movie.
So you would think his apartment would be a crime scene.
Yeah.
And he's repeatedly going back there and like hosting women there and living there, like a second apartment.
Maybe until he's not at the end. When it's, like,
and then
for sale.
there's that whole twist.
And also like, oh, we found Paul Allen was away this whole time on vacation.
Yeah.
So there's all that, like, the whole apartment thing makes no sense. Paul Allen actually was on vacation. And then, like, you think about, so something I caught this time, like, at one point he's doing crunches watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then, like, it's not shortly after that you get the weird chainsaw sequence that makes no sense. Like, spatially in the room, it makes no sense. None of it makes sense. Where did he get the chainsaw? Why is the room deformed now? It wasn't deformed. There wasn't anything spray painted on it. She's running down the halls. Fucking no one walks out of their room. And he, like, drops the chainsaw on her in, like, a perfect projectile.
That was hilarious.
Hilarious. And then he just goes, ah! So funny. But, so you start to put all that together, and yeah, like, for me, I think it is pretty clear that also, so, like I talked about at the beginning, like, part of the lens of this movie being, like, capitalism making people shitty, and, like, that being the take that this movie... But I also think it's very specifically, in a lot of ways, especially with him, like, about pathetic men, because at the end, when he's talking to the guy, and he's like, yeah, that was so funny, that voicemail you left me. Could you imagine Patrick Bateman? What a fucking idiot. Like, no way. And so, like, that to me really contextualized. Like, he doesn't even realize he's talking to Patrick Bateman. Paul Allen doesn't realize he's Patrick Bateman. Like, nobody even knows who he is. And so, like, this to me, like, all of that... combined with the weird chainsaw coincidence, combined with the other inconsistencies, on this most recent viewing, I sort of walked away going, oh, okay, so the violence is just, like, him being a weird incel, and these are, like, his fantasies, or even, like, psychotic episodes about how he wishes he could be in these scenarios, but he can't, because he's just a fucking garbage human being. With, like, couldn't even be a psychopath if he wanted to be a psychopath.
I will say, I think the scene where Gene finds his planner with all the very graphic photos kind of backs that up as well, because it would make sense that while he was daydreaming, he was doodling, because there were some specific images, or even when he was drawing on the table at dinner with his fiancée, he drew a picture of a naked lady with a chainsaw perfectly in her back.
But also, why was he drawing? Why did this place have
crayon?
Like children's tablecloths?
Places where apparently him and his friends pay $500 for dinner has a tablecloth you can draw on.
So it's not like a children's restaurant.
No, I don't think he's trying to impress her at this point.
Yeah,
so.
I doubt he would still go to it. Whatever.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, but I will say I think I was under the same impression where that there were too many clues that it wouldn't make sense for him to have done that, because, like, where did he have the bodies? Because they obviously weren't in Jared Leto's house. Although I will say it was very suspicious at the end, just to jump all over the place, as we do. At the end when he went to Paul Allen's place, and then the real estate agent was being really sketchy. The way she's like, oh, did you see the ad in the Times? And he said yes, and then she said there wasn't an ad in the Times, and gave him a weird look and said, never come back here again or something.
Yeah.
That,
you know what I thought?
I can't explain away.
I thought that was going to be like she was working for the cops. Like they staged it to catch him on the suspicion that he actually did murder Paul Allen. And also, we never, after that, like, we don't
ever
see him. Yeah, we just hear that he was actually...
Well, especially earlier, they were saying...
No.
Willem Dafoe said that the one guy they were talking to mistook some other guy for Paul Allen. And apparently no one in these offices knows who anyone is. So
because they're all the same.
They're all just shitty white men.
In that business card scene, they're all wearing the same glasses. They're all dressed pretty much like they all look like the same person.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, that business card scene.
Oh, it's so good, dude.
Maybe the funniest funniest scene in this whole movie.
They
just
all
is like,
spelled acquisitions wrong on all of their business cards.
But anyway, I was gonna say, it's what's his name, Willem Dafoe. We don't see at all past that last scene where they're like having dinner talking about.
That's right.
So I thought, we haven't seen him in a while. That's why I thought like that apartment open house thing was gonna be like a staged thing to catch him.
Or he never existed in the first place. Ooh.
He probably, with this interpretation, he probably never did exist, and that was just his own paranoia.
But I guess Paul Allen's girlfriend could still be suspicious if he went on a random work trip. So I guess there could have still been a private investigator involved in some capacity.
That's true.
Also, I have some clues to say that he might exist. But before we get there, because I do want to talk about Willem Dafoe in this movie, I do want to say, to your point about the weird landlord lady, or whoever she was, I don't know, that was selling the apartment.
Real estate agent.
Yeah, whatever. I was also kind of, like, confused. It was only on this rewatch where I kind of was like, okay, like, maybe that weirdness is, like, as a part of his episodes or fantasies, maybe he was, like, legitimately trying to get into the apartment, like, but just in a pathetic way of, like, he kept showing up there, and, like, she recognized him, and that's why she was like, can you please just go? But obviously that's never shown in the movie. Like, that is, I think that's way more headcanon fanfiction-y than the other stuff, where, like, I am pretty sure that all of this is supposed to be in his head. I think there's enough clues for that, like Carol said, but this real estate agent part is a bit more fanfiction-y, because there's literally no evidence to anything. It's just kind of whatever you bring to it based on how you viewed the rest of the movie. So yeah, I don't know, that's a possibility, but who knows?
Yeah. Although she doesn't recognize him when she first meets him in that scene. She only starts getting suspicious.
Well, he looks like every other white guy. Come on.
That's true. He works like every other white guy.
That's true. Is that the whole joke of this entire, like...
Kinda.
You can write anything off in this whole movie, is that, like, he's irrecognizable by anyone on planet Earth?
Well, yeah, that, like, in the 80s... just like shitty businessmen in the 80s were all just like a dime a dozen.
Like, maybe that's why his fiance's cheating on him. Maybe she doesn't even know. She thinks it's
she
him.
Confuses him with someone else. Yeah.
It's all the same. It's all the same. Okay, so to Willem Dafoe, and we kind of vaguely talked about this last week, and I teased that this would come back.
Yes.
Oh, this
Found
is
this
him?
in my research.
Yes. So he was either told by the directors or maybe it was his idea and they went with it. I don't remember. Carol, you can fact check me.
He was told by the directors, I'm pretty sure.
Awesome. Good for the director. That basically every scene he was in, they would do like different takes with different interpretations. So sometimes he would play it as if he was like 100% sure like that Christian Bale was the killer. Sometimes he would play it as if he had like no idea. He was literally just there because he thought Paul Allen was on vacation. And then they would, in editing, like, splice the different takes together to kind of leave you guessing, which I think is really cool. And I think it's effective, because, like, watching the movie, I never have any idea... Like, you can't get a read on his character, which is really effective, I think. So.
But it also makes sense, because that's how detectives work. They don't want to show their hand, right? So even if they suspect you, they'll probably... just play it off like, yeah, you're not really a suspect, because then you let your guard down and they can like tail you or something. And
it almost plays like he's being nice to him to lure him into saying something stupid, and then he tries to catch him on it, and it's really really effective. But then I do think it works for the interpretation as well of, you know, maybe those moments where he's turning and you feel like he's suspicious, maybe that's in Christian Bale's head. Like, maybe realistically he is there, and he's like, yeah, I know this guy's probably on vacation, but then, like, Christian Bale is misinterpreting shit and not understanding or bringing his own delusions of the situation to it, and then he's reading those lines of dialogue to be the more aggressive way. Like, that's a possibility as well. Yeah, I don't know. But I think it's really effective as a editing technique in the movie, and I think it's we haven't really talked, like, specifically about the performances, but I think it's, like, I think Willem Dafoe's great. His performance, I think everyone's performance is great. This is my favorite Christian Bale performance of all time. He is
really
fucking hysterical.
Someone who's played Batman, and that's not your favorite performance.
I especially on this rewatch, I was like, this is so funny. Like, it would be so goddamn hard to be funny, I feel like, in this movie when you're such a piece of shit. And you're saying and doing such piece of shit things. But he just has this perfect, overacted, like, thing to him.
On that note, like, now that
it's
I know...
It's all in the face.
Yes.
His face
now
is
that
insane.
I know... For me, it's all in the robotic narration.
Well, that too.
He based his character on an interview of Tom Cruise on a late night show.
Yes!
Because he said... He was really charismatic, but dead behind the eyes.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
That's my favorite fact about this movie. It's so good.
But yeah, now that I know that this is most likely, well, I mean, pretty much confirmed satire.
Yeah.
I can appreciate the performances a lot more, because when I was watching, I was like, a lot of these are really corny, but like it's clear now that they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Especially Christian Bale's.
Christian Bale's.
It is laughably bad, but in a purposeful way.
Yeah, and I also think it works for, again, regardless of sort of the metaphor context of the movie. Like, the literal context of the movie is that this person clearly is, like, just a legitimately a psychopath. Like, not like a movie psychopath, but like a clinical psychopath. And so,
like a sick person.
Like a sick person, which obviously serves the metaphor, but like that his performance being overacted is because he's portraying someone that is like trying to portray a person but doesn't understand how people function, and so he's so over the top. But it's so funny, and also like the other thing, since we're talking about the performance, that I was like struck by and that I really liked, obviously the satirical nature of Shitty Men is clear. The other thing that's very satirical, though, is of like people that have nothing to say, and like there was a scene in the movie that I laughed so hard at, and I was like, God, this just hit me so hard. And it's when they're like at dinner and someone's talking about like how horrific something is, and then he's like, well, before we talk about that, we should also talk about, and he just lists like 8 things of like, this is fucked up, and that's fucked up, and that's fucked up, and I was like, wow, like you have encapsulated the internet in 2022 of like, there's no ability to nuance talk or focus on anything.
He just wants to be part of the conversation.
It's just people that are like listing things at each other. It's like, I know this and I know that and I don't know anything about it. I can't
Twitter.
It's just knowing that these things are happening makes him a good person.
Exactly. And that like the satire of that, and that's what really also worked for me with him, like talking about the music but being like, what are you talking about? It made me think so much. Yeah, those shitty, like we've talked about before, those people that you know are just like diabolical people in real life, and then when like a major bad thing happens, they're posting on Instagram like, oh my God, like we need to all pay attention to this. And it's like, yeah, we've been paying attention to this. Where the fuck have you been? Like,
did you guys know that this is happening in this place?
Yeah, that the satire of that, which again, this movie is like 20, almost 5 years old. And Twitter and Instagram didn't exist. So the fact that they kind of predicted that, I was like, yeah, people are like that. So that's
a
funny.
Good point. That's a very good point. That's very effective.
Can I tell you my favorite line delivery of his, though?
Sure. I also, towards the end, I have a few quotes that I laughed out loud about.
I have so many. Okay.
But go ahead.
Okay. This one is, there's a bunch that I loved even before this rewatch, and just getting to them this time, I was like, hell yeah. But this quote I completely forgot about, and until this movie, until this rewatch, and then I saw it. Okay, it's really early in the movie, and I think it's the first scene of all the guys at the restaurant.
Okay.
And they're talking, and someone makes like an off-color remark about like Jewish people, and Christian Bale goes, guys, cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks. I lost my shit.
But it was more suave. Yeah. He was like, cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks.
I laughed so fucking hard. I wish I had more of a reason to use that line in my everyday life. Like,
what context are they?
I wish I knew an anti-Semitic person just so I could say that, like, to them.
Can I say one of mine?
Yeah,
now?
absolutely.
I'll kind of sprinkle them through. Let me get the list up. So mine was also pretty early in the movie. It's in the scene where they're meeting like a couple of friends at another restaurant. There's so many scenes in restaurants in this movie, but I think it's like the second restaurant. And he's like, I was beginning to like quiver because I wasn't sure if we were going to get a decent table, but luckily we did. And the line that I wrote down was, and coolness washed over me in an awesome wave.
Yeah, that's very early.
What is that?
What? He's so fucking, like, I just, oh my God, he's so unbelievably funny. Like, I can't with his that is the Goodfellas shit of like, on further rewatches, I'm just laughing like at the ridiculousness of the dialogue, but also like how he delivers it.
Like he sounds like a surfer dude.
Yes, that's what it's. Yeah, it's great. It's so great.
I will say.
Also,
I was gonna say I didn't write down any hilarious lines, mostly because I just wrote down the most horrible stuff he said instead.
Sure.
But
some of them are the same.
True.
Yeah, it's a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
But something I found hilarious is that, first of all, he's supposed to be 27 years old.
Yeah.
And second of all, he has a Les Mis poster and multiple times uses that as an excuse for getting out of things. And I just love that we're supposed to believe he's also a musical lover.
I loved, one thing I will say, about that first apartment scene was it's just an IKEA showroom. Like, there is no sense of anything. And when they cut to him going to take a piss and he's just staring at a Les Mis poster, I fucking died laughing. I was like, yep. Just like this guy who knows Les Mis is like a famous musical and has a poster of Les Mis in his fucking house, of course.
I could not see him going to, like he uses the excuse later, I have like a showing of Les Mis that I have to go to. I could never see him sitting through a musical in a theater.
Well, it is interesting, and I think this is kind of tied to his knowledge and interest in music, or at least that's how I interpreted it. It was just him having an overall knowledge of all things popular in the culture, so he can seem relevant and interesting to the people who seem to not really know he exists anyways, because no one cared that he was going to a Les Mis show anyway.
Yeah, well, even as the line in the cab of I think Reese Witherspoon asks him, like, why do you still work there or something? Yeah. He's like, because I want to fit in or something like that. Like, he openly admits it.
Yeah.
But, and this is random, but this is what I was going to say earlier is, I can't believe Willem Dafoe gets second billing in this movie.
I know, he's only in like 3 scenes.
I know.
Well,
it kind of got me...
because they had to hire big name actors because no one knew who Christian Bale was yet.
Oh.
Wow.
That was the only way the movie would get made with him. It was a whole thing. I don't know when we want to get into it, but there's just so many notes about the development of this. We could probably do it after we finish talking about, like, the actual substance of the movie. But, It was a shit show.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just, I noticed that, and I was like, oh shit, we're gonna get, like, a whole bunch of Willem Dafoe content in this movie. And he was in, like, 3 scenes, which is
well, that was the case
sad.
For pretty much everyone. Everyone was in a couple of scenes, or if they were in more scenes, it was just for less screen time.
Yeah, that's true. Everyone except Christian Bale.
Yeah, of course.
Standout role. He is so jacked, though. Oh my god. Like, when he's, like, shirtless doing his stretches and shit, and he was in the shower, I was like, I see why they cast him as Batman 2 years later. Jesus fucking Christ, dude.
Wait, okay, there was also that movie where he got super skinny.
The Machinist.
Was that between this and Batman?
This film was his first film where he had to do something dramatic with his body, and after this, I think the next, 6, he did extreme weight fluctuations.
It's just like a sine wave. He did this, and then he went super skinny, and then he gained all the muscle back for Batman Begins.
He seems like a very unhealthy person, to be honest.
Yeah, that can't be healthy.
It's definitely not.
He's an extreme method actor, too, so he worked out every single day and never stopped speaking in an American accent. I didn't even know he was from Wales, personally, so that shocked me.
Yeah.
He didn't talk to any of his fellow castmates in between takes. Like, he just fully was Patrick Bateman in a corner, not talking to anyone, only working out.
But here's the thing. So, because method actors, we obviously all roast them all the time.
Yeah.
Deservedly so. But I will say, I think it's fair to draw a distinction between method acting that's like...
Jared Leto
versus I don't want to drop my accent because, it's just easier to keep talking like this.
Continuing to work out to maintain the physique.
Sure, or even, I understand, because I think on Saving Private Ryan, pretty famously, spoilers for Saving Private Ryan, Matt Damon was isolated from the whole cast, and then they brought him in just for those scenes. So, I can understand, that stuff.
But also, Matt Damon was nobody back then.
That's true.
It's who was getting in line to see Matt Damon?
That is true. But yeah, fucking Matt Damon, piece of shit.
He advertised crypto now, so I don't give a fuck.
Fuck him.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say, in terms of, in the grand scheme of method actors, I do appreciate the ones that don't ever talk about it and basically just, do their own thing, as opposed to Jared Leto, that...
I wonder what he did for this movie.
I
Actually,
wish
I
it was,
don't want to know.
I wish it was get killed. That would be my favorite thing he could have done for this movie. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about...
So, when we do the scene where I die, I want to run it by you, but I'd actually like to die.
I want you to actually... That would have...
I can take it.
Such a piece of shit. Yeah, that's maybe my favorite scene in this whole movie, just because it's one of my favorite actors killing my least favorite person ever. But also, I mean, like, also that scene is great. Like, the performance of it, and Christian Bale just, like, dancing and putting on the raincoat and, like, sliding into the room. Like,
it's that meme of him pointing to the cassette tapes. There's so many memes came from this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The business card scene, like, that whole scene is just...
That scene's fantastic.
I loved it. Let's see Paul Allen's car. Like, of course, these yuppie businessmen would just take out their eggshell-colored business cards with their fine print and compare the minute details.
The details of the font.
The font that they used and the raised lettering. The texture of the card. It was great.
It's so good. It's so funny. General Talbot from Hulk 2003 is in this movie. Did you recognize him?
Who's General Talbot?
I think it's Josh Lucas Carroll.
Oh.
I think.
Yes.
Who's
correct.
General Talbot in?
Yeah, he's the one that loves Betty too. Oh, he's the one that gets freeze framed.
I was gonna say
that
I
guy.
recognize him from the freeze frame,
Yeah.
and that's the only reason why I
that
can
guy.
confirm
Okay.
he was in both films.
Yeah.
You're right. You're
The
right.
one I
This was his
recognized
era.
from Sweet Home Alabama because I didn't see Hulk.
Oh yeah, you didn't see Hulk.
I did not.
We had to describe all that to
Yeah,
you.
we have to explain
And you
it.
guys did a great job. I see it all in my head all the time.
Yeah.
You're right. That was him.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah.
He was like the Sam Worthington of the early 2000s.
Wasn't Sam Worthington the Sam Worthington of the early 2000s?
Yeah,
I think it was
what
mid.
was... I think it was... What was...
He's definitely mid.
Clash of the Titans was like 2009?
Was
8?
it that late? I thought it was like 2005.
Well, Terminator Salvation was 2007.
Avatar was 2009, and he was in that, I think.
And I thought Clash of the Titans was like right around there too.
Maybe. I don't know.
So the late 2000s was
he took over when
his era, yeah.
the other guy
When Josh
was
Lucas
done, when he
stopped.
was out. Yeah.
When Josh Lucas was
You're
officially
out.
out.
You can't do this to me.
What? Well, you can't do this to me. I started this company. You know how much I sacrificed?
Have you guys ever seen Poseidon?
No,
No.
but I know what that movie is. That's like where
Josh
he attacks
Lucas
the
is
cruise
also
ship.
in it. That's why I asked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that was in like the transition range between the Clash of the
Right.
Titans stuff and before that.
Perfect.
And the Hulk era.
The end of the
era.
Lucas era.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I have an interesting point that has to do with the end of the movie. Well, I'm calling it interesting. Maybe you guys don't think it's
Go
interesting.
for it. I'm sure it'll be.
I think, hear me out.
Alright.
When we get that scene of the receptionist going through the journal or the schedule at the end, seeing all the drawings and stuff, it got me thinking. I think I would have been more interested if this movie, if she was the protagonist, and it was a situation where she's like, I think my boss might be a serial killer, and she has to like.
But she still wants
We
to
see
fuck
it from
him?
her point of view. No, not necessarily. Like we see it from her point of view, and she like has to investigate because she works in like his office and stuff.
Yeah.
And then like we could have seen it, like all this stuff could have happened, but we could have seen it from her point of view, and maybe we would have gotten some like comeuppance for Patrick Bateman and like a more fitting ending that way. We would have had a female protagonist. I think it
Yeah.
would have helped a lot too with the content of this movie. You know.
I also think that could.
See, I don't
maybe
know if
help
the
with
author would have signed off on that.
The author of the book, definitely not.
Yeah, but also, like, I don't know, sometimes... It's so weird how some authors are like, I get every creative decision I have to sign off on, and then some are like, ugh. Like, fucking, when Stanley Kubrick made The Shining, Stephen King
That's
was
what
like,
I was just thinking.
I'm gonna fucking kill myself, this is a terrible adaptation of my book, and that's Stanley Kubrick. Meanwhile, the lady that wrote the 50 Shades movies is like, actually, I'm gonna fire everyone and just direct the rest of them. Like, how?
Oh, that happened?
I don't know if she directed them,
I don't think
but
she
she
At least
wrote
not
the
credited.
screenplays.
Oh.
Like originally they had like competent people, and then they were like, she was like, no, because they're changing.
J.K. Rowling did.
They're changing too much of my stuff, so I got to write the screenplays, and then I think like someone she knew she like hired to direct it, basically.
Wow.
There's a great YouTube channel called Folding Ideas. He's the guy that made the episode on the Suicide Squad editing.
Yeah, I've seen them around.
He has like hour-and-a-half long breakdowns on each one of the 50 Shades movies. He's like obsessed with the lore of like what happened with those movies, and I would recommend those videos. I've only ever seen the first 50 Shades, and it was kind of as a joke. It was kind of as a joke, yeah. But I would recommend watching those videos, because it's really interesting, and it goes into this idea of like author ownership and what they can and can't do depending on the situation. So yeah, I don't know how much the shitty man author that wrote this book had control over, but I do think the idea of the female protagonist works, and then I also think it works because all the unreliable narrator stuff is like, because she's projecting that even. So like maybe he's not a psychopath, maybe he's just an asshole at the end of the movie, but like if we see him doing the murder and stuff, it's because like that's her projections based on his personality, and then when it's revealed that that's not true, that's like a plot twist that like, no, he's just a dickhead, but he's not like this fucking white whale serial killer that she has to track down or anything. He's just like an asshole. So that's also a possibility that could have been achieved by changing who the protagonist was as well.
Yeah. You know, I find it funny that like, if it's true that the author of the book had that much creative control over this movie, I like to think that the director directed this satirically under his nose.
Yeah, like he didn't realize.
Notice. Like he's like, oh, this is so good. Like this is glorifying my wonderful protagonist. And the whole time she was just playing, like this whole movie is just like a trick.
Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
like under. Oh, do you need to take that?
No, I don't. I don't know. What
you can pause if you want.
No, fuck. I don't. No, it's nothing important.
Okay.
So I was gonna say maybe now would be a good time to put in the timeline of the development of this film, because it might maybe illuminate how much creative control he had or didn't have over it. Okay. Because to begin...
Just before you do that, though, sorry. Just real quick.
Absolutely.
You were talking about 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
Speaking of porn, there's a scene in this when he's just watching porn on his TV like he's watching a movie.
Yeah.
And I laughed really hard at that.
Yeah,
like, and the porn is White Angel, released in 1998, which does not go with the timeline at all.
Oh, is it anachronistic?
Well, this movie is supposed to take place in the 80s?
Yeah, it's supposed to be
87?
See, I also didn't even clue into that until like near the end of the movie when Reagan was on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was like present day when the movie was made for a lot of it. I just missed.
There's not a ton of clues to point in either direction, other than I guess like even just like the terminology of using the word yuppie. That was a very 80s thing, but they don't draw that much attention to it to where until you see Reagan, it's kind of like, oh wait, this is the 80s.
Yeah, I was like, did Reagan come right before George Bush or something?
Yeah, I guess that is a good point, because they didn't even show that much technology. Like the TV might have kind of given it away, but even then I don't think it looked that different from like 2000 to the 80s.
I guess the
other
cell
than
phone,
size,
or the brick phone, I mean.
But
that was a pretty old cell phone, so
yeah.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say before you can transition now.
Okay, so yes, this novel came out in 1991, and in the same year was optioned. And initially, the author of the novel wanted to write the screenplay himself, or at least the script. Are they different? I should know that.
No, it's the script and screenplay are the same.
Cool.
Same thing.
So anyway, he was supposed to write it. He really struggled writing it. It kind of made him like hate the original work because he just didn't like that. But that was still the plan. He was going to write it, and Stuart Gordon was going to direct, and Johnny Depp was supposed to star. That was the initial plan on the year of release, as it was optioned. Yeah. But Stuart Gordon wanted to do the film in black and white and stick as close to the book as possible, meaning a guaranteed X rating. And then, as far as I can tell, I should have actually written this in chronological order because it went all over the place. But I think the next thing that happened is that then David Cronenberg was set to direct, and Brad Pitt was supposed to star. And the author of the novel was once again brought on to write the screenplay. But Cronenberg didn't want to use any restaurant or nightclub material from the novel because he thought it was boring. he wanted...
That's like half the movie.
I know. He wanted the script to be 65 to 70 pages, and it initially ended with an elaborate musical sequence to Barry Manilow's Daybreak atop the World Trade Center.
Okay.
And that is when the author of the novel realized he was just bored with the material, and so I don't think he was signed on to write the screenplay for any of the other changes that happened, because next, the studio that ended up owning the rights, I think it was Lionsgate at this point, really wanted DiCaprio to be the star, because this was shortly after Titanic, and he was considered to be the biggest actor in the world at that point in time, and so since they really wanted him, they told him like he could pick a director, and he wanted a major director, and his short list included Danny Boyle, Stanley Kubrick, and Martin Scorsese, but eventually Oliver Stone was hired to direct, and he ended up also casting Leto still as one of the leads, and Cameron Diaz in Reese Witherspoon's role.
My two most hated actors in the same fucking movie.
You hate Cameron Diaz?
I don't hate Cameron Diaz. She's fine.
That's a bit of an exaggeration then.
But eventually Oliver Stone also backed down. And DiCaprio backed down after Oliver Stone did. So then the actual person who directed it and co-wrote it, Mary Harron, became signed on. I think that was the order of events. And they announced that DiCaprio was starring in it before things were finalized. So then when he backed down, it was really dramatic. And then afterwards, Lionsgate offered the role to Ewan McGregor, who turned it down after Bale personally asked him to do so.
But that would have conflicted with Star Wars.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have gotten The Phantom Menace.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess thanks to Christian Bale for convincing him to turn it down. But before he was actually considered, the director offered the role to Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Edward Norton, and Vince Vaughn.
Nope.
But after
Vince
they all
Vaughn.
declined, Lionsgate begrudgingly agreed to hire Christian Bale with a small $50,000 salary.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that
Wouldn't
is...
it be $50,000 for this?
Yeah, and so then Lionsgate still said the budget couldn't go over $10 million, and that recognizable actors would have to fill the supporting roles, and so that's why everyone else was cast. But the director and Christian Bale really wanted to get Winona Ryder to play Reese Witherspoon's role, but she said no. And I think that's the whole timeline. I think I got it all. Yeah, so by the end, I think he was a lot less involved, and if I remember correctly, I didn't write it down, he wasn't the biggest fan of the film, but it wasn't life-ruining in a Stephen King kind of way. But I don't think he had anything, like, specifically bad to say about that. Like, they ruined it or misinterpreted it or, like, made it too feminist. He didn't seem to, like, shit-talk it too much. He was just like, yeah, it was fine.
Maybe even at that point, he still hadn't caught on.
You didn't get it.
Yeah. So I think that's the history of the film. Because no one wanted to make it because in some countries, they even sold the novel wrapped in shrink wrap because it was deemed to be so, like, messed up. And that you had to be over 18 to buy the book, and it's a whole thing. So that's why no one really wanted to make it.
Open it?
Yeah.
At the store?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we got Mary Harron, because this would have been a completely different movie.
Yeah,
with
I was
anyone
just going to say,
yeah.
This is the best case scenario for this movie, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like, everyone else we described, well, all talented, it just would have been a slasher movie.
Ewan McGregor would have been interesting, though. And then we could have bypassed the prequels altogether.
No. I mean, performance-wise, I think Ewan is the only other one I could have seen in this besides Christian.
It does give me, what was the Shining sequel we watched? Dr. Sleep vibes?
Dr. Sleep, yeah.
I feel like his performance would be kind of similar to the character he played in that.
I think he could do it.
Yeah.
Wait, really? You think his character in Dr. Sleep is, like, psychopathic?
No, not psychopathic, but just traumatized. I think his character in that is like baseline good, and obviously the character in this is baseline evil. But I think on the surface, some traits might be shared.
Yeah, I think it would work, but I also do think in that scenario it would be probably a bit of a different take. Like, I don't know if I could see him in this movie from this writer and director, but like maybe one of the other writer or directors. But I'm like, I wouldn't be interested. Like, I love Marty Scorsese, obviously. I would not be interested in a Martin Scorsese American Psycho.
Well, we got that. It's
kinda.
called Wolf of Wall Street.
It's called.
Do you think he did that because he couldn't
maybe,
score this?
maybe, and I can't wait to talk about that. Also, DiCaprio stars in that movie, so
Yeah,
there you go. That's just them being like, "Fuck you, we're making our own version."
Sorry, I just found in my notes that Lionsgate was going to pay Leonardo DiCaprio $20 million to be in this film. And then they gave
but they
Christian
can't go
Bale
over a budget of $10 million for anyone else.
Yeah, 50,000. That makes me appreciate Christian Bale's performance even more because he
Damn.
acted his goddamn ass off, and he made like
the
no
passion.
money.
Yeah,
The
passion
physical,
project.
like, change his
I
body went
know.
through before and after.
But
Dude
this
was
did
jacked.
kickstart his career, so
Yeah,
worth it.
That's fair.
I believe this is the movie that got him Batman, because if
Yeah.
I remember correctly from the Batman Begins behind the scenes, because I watched all of that shit as a kid, that Nolan was like trying to convince the studio, and they were like, no, because like, have you seen The Machinist? This guy weighs like 5 pounds. There's no, what are you talking about? And he was like, no.
Not that one.
American Psycho. Look, he's jacked and he can act really well. And they were like, oh yeah, he can. Yeah, sure, okay.
So it wasn't the performance; it was just the quality of performance.
Yeah.
Because this is like
exactly.
nothing like Batman.
Nothing like.
He's closer to the Joker in this movie.
I think someone said this before, and I think it's true that he is the only Batman actor that I think could probably equally play Batman or the Joker, and he would be convincing as.
After watching this, yeah,
I think so. And I mean, guys know I love Robert Pattinson. Obviously, we all love Robert Pattinson as Batman. But like, I would not be interested in a Robert Pattinson Joker. I don't think, because I think it would just be a little too Edward Cullen-y for me. Like, not that it would
be too like emo.
It would be it would still be too emo. I wouldn't be into it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm tired of like for this next Joker. Like, I want an old seasoned Joker. Like, I don't want. I know it's been thrown around that the Stranger Things guy could
David
probably
Harbour?
play a convincing Joker. No.
Yeah, David Harbour.
No.
I don't know who you're talking about.
What other? The children? Like, who else?
One.
Joe Keery?
I mean,
Oh, one.
that guy.
As the
I don't-
Joker?
he's-
He would be a fine Joker.
Yeah, people have been saying that. I think
I
he
don't
would
really
make a
like
good
him.
Joker, but I wouldn't prefer another young, like, hot Joker. Like,
Yeah,
I
I know.
Like, I don't want to go down the Jared Leto route again.
No,
like, I want
no.
Willem Dafoe. Speaking of Willem Dafoe
Yes,
in this movie,
fucking he
please,
is the Joker.
Just make him
Or
the new
could we
Joker.
even maybe have like 5 years without a Joker on screen
Yes,
at all ever?
That's ideal.
Yes,
but
that is the
that's
number
not going
one.
to happen. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm
pushing
so
that
over
aside
it.
completely.
There's too many.
too.
How do they even keep it canon? It doesn't make sense.
I don't know. Well,
There's
we're
3
getting
Jokers.
this. We're getting another Joker in the other universe too, which is going to be a musical.
Just like the comic 3 Jokers, guys. Remember when DC made that
Is
comic?
that what they're doing? Are we going to get a
there's
third
no
Joker?
way.
And
There's
also,
no way they're gonna
how
make a
you
3
said
Jokers
"remember" as if yes, I remember that as a comic.
It was the biggest moment. That was like my favorite meme of like summer after first year when DC announced they were like, we're doing a comic and it's called 3 Jokers and there's gonna be 3 different Jokers, and I just kept that whole summer being like, oh my god, 3 isn't it cool that we're getting 3 Jokers? Like, it is the most creatively bankrupt bullshit, but a local artist drew it and I have it signed and it's on my wall because he drew it and I'm supporting him. But it is an awful story. Yeah.
Sorry.
Also,
Can I take us back 1 point as we were talking about Joker the musical? Did you know there was an
Yeah.
American Psycho musical that was on Broadway and also the East End in London?
No,
I did not know that.
Okay.
well, it
Was
existed.
it like this movie where it was through this lens, or was it like not
I
the good
don't
lens?
know actually specifically.
Not the good lens.
I think it's probably going to be a bad lens because it was made after a Kickstarter campaign was started by
okay.
the novel's
Bad
author.
lens.
Um,
Oh yeah, there we go.
okay. Yeah,
there
well, that
we go.
answers it right there.
Yeah.
See,
music
that's
and
weird. Like, I
lyrics
could
weren't
see-
by him, so I don't know if
I would
maybe
hope
the
not.
person who wrote it were in a more positive lens.
Again, it's the same thing of like he's getting duped again.
He just keeps getting duped. He's like, oh, damn it.
No, but he'll never notice. Yeah, but it's weird. Like
Regardless, it
if-
crashed and burned, so it's pretty irrelevant.
Okay.
Because it came
If it
out
was
around
like
the same
this
time
movie-
as like Hamilton and Waitress, and it just didn't stand a chance in
Oh,
New York.
okay, yeah.
Although
It's that
in London
recent,
it
no
starred
chance.
Matt Smith. I don't know if
Oh.
anyone knows him, but yeah.
the Doctor Who guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Morbius guy.
He
Morbius.
played
The
Patrick
half-sex
Bateman.
guy.
Yeah.
He played what?
He played Patrick Bateman in the musical.
Oh, for some reason I heard he played Happy Feet, and I was like, Carol, what the fuck did you just say right now? You telling me this motherfucker was the voice of Happy Feet?
No,
You know who was?
That's fake.
Elijah Wood.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah, of course.
Anyway, I was just gonna say, like, if the musical was like the movie, I could see it, like a satire. But
Yeah.
if it was like the vision of the
No.
book, I don't see that at all.
That would be awful. That would be
No,
terrible.
it didn't even make it a whole year.
Okay, it's been a little while, so I want to do another one of my quotes. that I
Perfect, because
referenced.
I have a few other quotes that I would like to get out as well. So.
Okay.
I have one too of my horrible yet funny ones.
Oh, well, you
Okay.
haven't done one yet. Do you want to do yours first?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Mine is. I'm getting there. You can edit out the pause. If you're so hungry, why don't you get a job? Before he kills that homeless man
Yes,
and
yeah.
dog. Oh my god.
That was really, that was excellent. Like horrible, but excellent.
Yeah.
It's also, it's hilarious when he stands up. He's like, "Yeah, you and I don't have anything in common."
It's so good, dude. He's so good in this. Holy fuck! Like I don't understand. He's so funny.
Okay, here's another one of mine. It's in I think it's the business card scene, but it's before it happens when one of the guys sitting next to him is complimenting his suit. And he's like, "It's so soft, can I feel it?" And he slaps his hand and he's like, "Your compliment was sufficient, Lewis."
Yeah, fantastic.
Is Lewis the one who tries to kiss him later on?
I think
can't
so.
remember.
Yes,
I believe so.
I believe so. Yeah. Okay. I have two, and they're both also very famous TikToks on audio that people use all the time on. Did I say TikToks on audio? I meant audios on TikTok.
Yeah.
If I said it reversed. And they have both become like common vernacular between myself and Madison. Like we just say this to each other all the time. Okay. So the first one is, "It's just not possible. Why not, you stupid bastard?"
That one's great because it's like stupid bastard is the lamest combination of It's like a child just learned those two
Yeah,
words and they're using them together.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard? That one is obviously great, and I think that's the more common one on TikTok. Like everyone posts that on TikTok. It's the one that kills Maddie and I, and that we legitimately must say at least once a day, is it happens when his assistant has come over for drinks and they're talking, and she says, "Oh, are you still in a relationship?" And he says, "Maybe. I don't know."
Oh, is
Not
that what
really.
you said I was gonna recognize?
Oh, that was your reference. Okay.
Also, sorry, I just need to air out this grievance right now. These fucking
Okay.
guys send messages like that in the group chat. 3 vague, nonsensical words, and they just have the memory to be like, "Oh, of course, it's from this movie." Those 3 words could have been in any film, a reference to any
guess.
fucking thing. You said that in the chat, and then you're like, "Don't worry, you'll get it eventually." When I saw the movie, it didn't fucking click. 'Cause it's just 3 words.
I didn't catch it either.
You guys, I hate you.
No, it's just me. That's just
You
my
do
brain.
this all the time. You like
When do I
quote
do
things
this?
and you're like, "I remember it's from this exact film. Of course it is." And I'm like,
No,
"How do you remember?"
it's not Dan, Carol. It's I do it. Dan,
And
like...
then you do it often enough that Dan catches on and remembers.
Well, no, Dan just, Dan recognizes
Well, I
it.
guess because it's usually from Star Wars. Usually
Yeah,
like the prequels, so
exactly.
of course
or
I'd
Spider
recognize
or
it.
the Spider-Men.
Or
the
Sam
Spider-Man.
Raimi Spider-Man.
Yeah.
The two most familiar movies of all time. Yeah, I don't know. Listen, maybe, I don't know, not really. It's just, like, the ultimate string of words. And, like, the way he says it is so fucking hilarious because it's so nonchalant. Like, it's like as if he's only thinking about the idea in this moment. Like, he literally is like, "Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. No, not really, actually." Anyway, Matt and I, anytime Madison and I are talking and one of us has to say maybe, it is immediately always followed up by "I don't know, not really," no matter what the context. Like, I put it to a test, Dan. Like, when we're at the Thor premiere tomorrow, like, cue either me or Maddie up to say the word maybe, and I'm sure it will happen. I'm sure one of us will finish it, okay? Like, that is always what...
I'll try.
Finish it! That's always what happens. That's another quote, Carol.
Deliver us! Finish it! Finish it! Evil!
I will say when I Googled, maybe,
Did you
I don't
catch
know,
it?
not really right now, the first image is from American Psycho.
Of course it is. Listen.
See, I
But
didn't know
there
this
is
one was
also,
a meme.
for some reason, like gifs from Schitt's Creek, pictures from The Good Place. It's everything.
Because it's just 3 words.
It's just 3 words.
That's what I'm
But-
saying.
I'm sure they've been used in that order plenty of times.
Hey, listen. what makes it recognizable is that it became a TikTok audio for so long. Like that was what like cemented it, because you just start hearing it enough, and then when I saw it in the movie again, I was like, oh yeah, that's the line. And so now it's just a line that I'm gonna know for the rest of my life. The first 2 times watching this movie, I was not like the classic American Psycho line. Obviously, no. It's the combination of just the internet being like, we're picking this one. This is gonna be the next one.
Yeah. I have another one.
Okay.
If you guys don't mind. I really want to get this one out.
Yeah, go for it.
Which one should I have 2 more. Which one should I do first? Okay, I'll do...
I have 1 more.
Okay. I'll do this, and then you can do...
Okay.
Do you have any more, Carolina? Like, quotes?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'll do this, you do your last one, and I'll do my last
Okay.
one after that. Okay, so another one of my favorites is they're doing, like, coke in the bathroom stall in that one scene, you remember?
Yeah.
And the guy next to them, like, they're having a conversation or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guy next to them is like, can you keep it down? I'm trying to do drugs. And then the other guy just, like, leans over the stall and is like, fuck you! And then after that, he's like, sorry, it's the steroids.
Comedy spectacular. Mine is also about coke,
Okay.
and it's from it might even be like the first line in the movie,
Damn.
and it's someone, I forget who, walks out of the washroom and says, oh, they don't have a good bathroom to do coke in.
Yeah.
It's like, it's very early in the movie, and that made me laugh really, really hard.
Like, how is any bathroom better than another one to do coke?
Yeah, it's hysterical. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, my last one.
Go for it.
This is probably my favorite quote in the entire movie.
Okay.
It's when Patrick and Paul Allen... By the way, I will never just say Paul. I'll always say his
Paul
full
Allen.
name.
Yeah.
When they're at that one restaurant that they call, like, shitty.
Yeah.
And they're getting mad at, like, the waiter for not having a certain dish or whatever. And then the waiter's like, so do you want to hear the specials? And Patrick's like, not if you want to keep your spleen. In a very casual way.
So good. He's so... Like, when I read that Christian Bale based his performance on Tom Cruise, like, real-life Tom Cruise, I was like, yeah. Like, that makes perfect sense to me.
Not the Tom Cruise we see in movies.
No.
The Scientologist
No.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
The like, charismatic but dead behind the eyes, just like, ha 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 ha, like that Tom Cruise, like, yeah, like, it is so that. And maybe that's why I find it so funny, just because, like, yeah, it's hilarious. It's great. It's incredible.
That's all I had for notes, though. Anyway.
I am
written down.
also out of notes. Carol?
I
Hit us
have,
with the notes.
Yeah, 2 things I just wanted to mention at some point. So now, at the end, is as good a time as any. One was that, obviously, as we've discussed, there are many differences between the movie and book. But one thing I am a little bit sad that we missed out on in the movie version, not the extra violence, but towards the end of the book. Also, the book takes place across 2 years, where the movie takes place across whatever weeks, months, obviously shorter timeline. But in the novel, towards the end, when his mental state is deteriorating, he has really bizarre hallucinations along with the really violent ones. But some of them include a Cheerio being interviewed on a talk show, being stalked by an anthropomorphic park bench, and finding a bone in his bar of Dove soap. And I thought that would be
Yeah, I
fun to
would have
see.
liked to see
But,
that.
Yeah, that would have been very fun.
you know, maybe it
That
was
would've
in the
helped.
musical.
That would have helped, I think, with the take.
Yeah, of
Or
whether
it
it
would've
really
helped.
happened or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would have helped, like, make that more convincing.
Yeah, just a bit more, like, surrealism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Almost
Also,
like a drug sequence.
one more thing to mention, the musical was featured in my favorite show of all time, Riverdale, on chapter 112, American Psychos, of the 6th and not, unfortunately, final season of the show. So I can't wait till
I
I
like how
get
it's your
there because I
favorite show.
haven't been there yet. Not actually. I hate watch it with Rachel.
I was going to say, you said it's your favorite show, and you're like, unfortunately, the next season is
Yeah,
not
no,
the last.
I'm joking. It's actually torture to watch. But my last facts have to do with the way Lionsgate decided to promote this film. Do either of you know of any weird promotions?
No.
Okay, so you could go online and request or register to receive emails from Patrick Bateman, quote unquote, supposedly to his therapist. And so the emails were written by a writer attached to the film and approved by the book's author. And they follow Bateman's life following the events of the film, where he discusses such developments as his marriage to and impending divorce settlement with his former secretary, Jean, his complete adoration of his son, Patrick Jr., and his efforts to triumph over his business rivals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is like, that must be one of the earliest, like, movie ARGs, like, interactive
Right?
promotion.
Yeah,
that I've
I
heard
mean,
of.
it's like right in that sweet spot of like, oh, we can do this now. Yeah, it must have been one of the first ones.
I will say I'd be a little curious to see if it does illuminate what's fact and fiction a little bit more, because obviously these depict him marrying a person who in theory knows he's either a serial killer or wannabe serial killer, so I don't know how they make that make sense.
Oh, you think maybe it's like these letters are fantasy?
Yeah,
Like
I don't
this
know.
is what he wishes happened?
I have no idea.
Because, like, Patrick Jr.,
Yeah.
like, that's a quintessential, like, dreaming of your
hilarious.
future.
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah,
have
yeah.
a kid named my name Junior. Yeah.
But another thing they did to promote the movie, which I think is hilarious, and they spent the equivalent of Christian Bale's salary on this. They made an online stock market game called Make a Killing with American Psycho, which invited players to invest in films, actors, or musicians using fake Hollywood money.
Oh, so you could
I don't
just,
even know
like,
what that means.
it's like a stock market game?
But,
it's
like, the
fake?
stock market is only actors and movies and musicians.
That's really weird.
That is
Yeah.
weird.
I don't understand.
Yeah. So I don't know what they were thinking. Also, just the marketing of it seems to be antithetical to, first of all, the point that the movie's trying to make, and also
Yeah.
the vibe of the movie. But
Yeah.
whatever. I don't work for any of these companies yet. But what a mess. And that's all I have to say. That's all my interesting notes. Most of my notes were just me trying to piece together who was going to make this movie when and why and with whom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can I
think
just
that's
say-
everything. Sorry, Dan, go
Can
ahead.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, can I, like, close out this discussion with the point that, like, I feel like this movie has, like, mostly negatively... Well, no, let me reword that. I feel like this movie is more negatively, like, prominent than ever with the like, the rise of crypto and all that shit.
Yeah.
So, like this takes place in the 80s, where, you know, like, finance bros, like, they're Wall Street guys, right?
Yeah.
And this is pre all this new, like, environment with crypto and NFTs, which is only even more annoying. Like, it adds a
Yeah,
whole
everyone
other
can be a
layer of
finance
annoying.
guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. So I feel like this takes on a new significance
Sure.
in pop culture even today.
I think Wolf of Wall Street is going to be even worse.
Yeah, you're right. That
Like,
will be
at
worse.
least this, for me, I don't... Like, the finance stuff is, like, the B plot. Like,
Yeah.
because there's so much other, like, wrong shit. Like, because he is a wannabe, whatever, in his head, serial killer. Because, like, all that shit is happening. Whenever the finance stuff happens, I'm like, oh, you're just an extra. That's just the cherry on top of the piece of shit cake. But, like, Wolf of Wall Street is so methodical about, like, look how I stole people's money being a
That's
finance
true.
bro, that, like, when we watch that, which we eventually will
Yeah.
on this sub-series, especially in crypto times, yeah, that is going to be insufferable. I
Yeah.
feel like, yeah. I want to maybe wrap this all up in a bow, being a red flag movie, with just discussing, like, in particular, like, the red flag nature of it, and, like, is there anything, maybe this can be like a way we end all red flag movie discussions.
Yeah,
Okay.
is this like our thing we do in lieu of a recommendation? Because we also
Sure.
haven't done that. Okay.
Sure. We can do that in lieu of recommendations. That's going to be a new quote. I'm just going to say in lieu from now on, and I'm going to see if people get it.
I really
Of course they won't.
struggled to say it, to be honest. I didn't want to exit my
It's
mouth.
not even it's a reference to our private
I know.
conversation we had.
My quotes are not quotes. They're just things I've heard that I enjoy that tickle my brain. Like, I don't know how I want to phrase this question exactly, but I think you guys know what I'm trying to get at here, which is the idea of, like, does this movie have worth beyond its red flagness? And, like, how much of the red flagness is warranted, I guess. And I guess those are kind of two different questions, but I'll kick it off by saying, like, for me, in terms of, like, thinking about the red flag movies we're going to be talking about, like, because we, fun fact, have, like, a list of red flag movies that we're going to pop in every once in a while, too. Even though this one, like, is the quintessential kind of, like, red flag movie, everyone talks about American Psycho, all the red flag stuff in this is present in other things as well. Like, we've seen, like, really violent shit. We've seen, like, horrific men taking advantage of women in other shit. We've seen finance bro stuff in other shit. And it's all present here. All that red flagness is present here. But and maybe it's my own, like, naivete, but I just have such a hard time. Like, with Wolf of Wall Street, I completely understand and remember the reaction of people being like, I want to be a finance bro after they saw that movie. But I just don't understand how fucking anyone on Earth could watch this movie and actually side with or take something away from Patrick Bateman other than laugh at him for being a pathetic 80s incel. So,
But people do.
but that's like the thing that I struggle with is I'm kind of like I want to say that as far as red flag movies go, like, the red flag aspects of this are pretty tame in comparison, and I think there is, like, interesting elements to it. Like, we just had a pretty good discussion on it. But at the same time, like, maybe I'm underestimating how fucked up people are. But I just, like, I cannot even begin to imagine how you could watch this movie in, like, a literal, like, not getting it, like, being like, yeah, isn't he great? Like, I don't...
Like, he's the hero.
And I guess people do watch it that way because it has a reputation as being a red flag movie. So, like, it has that reputation for a reason. I'm sure women have met men that are like, oh my god, American Psycho, isn't he so awesome?
There's a whole
Like,
Reddit thread about it.
oh, great.
I'm sure.
Great. Well, anyway, so I'm just gonna say, if you are, like, if you have even an inch of, like, self-awareness in you somewhere, and you understand how to, like, view art through lenses, and you're not literally a despicable human being, I think that there is something to get out of this outside of its red flagness, and I think if you power through the red flag aspects of it, there's something there worth at least seeing and thinking about. Like, you might not like it, but there's stuff to think about in it. So that's where I would sort of, that's my stance on it, in terms of it being a red flag movie.
Okay. I guess I'll go next.
Yeah.
So the two tiers of the question are, like, do you think it deserves its red flag reputation, and would you otherwise recommend it for its own quality?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I do think I understand completely why it holds that reputation of being a red flag movie. Not to reiterate too much what you just said, but yeah, I mean, it's all about people just looking through the wrong lens when watching this movie. It comes down to that, because the actual movie, and this will transition to the other point of, like, would I recommend it, is there is actually like another point to the reason this movie was made, and it's clearly satire. And I think I probably would recommend it, mostly though because it's so funny.
It is
and
funny.
Like, there's so many memorable lines. Like, I'll probably watch it again at some point just to laugh at it, if nothing else. So yeah, I do think, although, as I previously stated, I do have some problems with the ending, like, I would do it differently. I think if you're watching it the right way, and I mean, I hate to say that, like, to imply that there's like an objectively right way to watch art, but like that's to say if you're not watching it in the wrong way, I'll just say that there's no right way, but there are wrong ways.
Yes.
Then it could have the potential to be a pretty well done movie.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about it too much either, but like it's got strategic cinematography and like we said, like the performances are perfect for what this movie's trying to do and all that other technical stuff that we didn't even get into. So there's a lot that the movie has to offer, for sure.
Yeah, I will say, as much as even I went into this saying some of it was hard to watch, and I do wholeheartedly believe the novel is a red flag novel.
Yes.
I don't think it's fair to say that this movie is a red flag movie, because sure, there are shitty men who watch this and idolize, obviously, the villain of the film, but especially knowing the intention behind it and the message that they're trying to portray, like, they are going into this with the intention of showing how bad capitalism is and how much it can mess up shitty people. But I think even further than that, even the finance bro side of it, it also took great lengths to show that no one in that world was happy. Some of them weren't even thriving. Like, sure, they all made money, but they were all miserable. Some of them didn't feel like they even had identity or personhood, like Patrick Bateman. And so, like, as you were saying, I think the people who can watch that and be like, this is what I dream to be, are just wrong and or dumb. And I don't think that can be the fault of the movie. I do think there were some gratuitous shots that probably could have been left out, and I don't think really added to the messaging of it. And like probably should have been, content warninged a little bit more. So like that's something to keep in mind if you do want to watch this. But I do think, if you're able to look away at strategic moments, the message is clearly, positive, and something I do agree with, that like the system that we're all trying to be in and just capitalism and productivity in general is a toxin, and is killing us all slowly. I think that movie does really demonstrate that well, and it is very much showing that all of these men are shitty, and it's never glorifying any of them. So I don't think it's the movie's fault. I don't think it should be a red flag movie. I think just the people who like it are red flags themselves, and it has nothing to do with the movie itself. But it is still a very interesting watch, and it is funny and has great performances.
Thanks again for listening to the Feature Length Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to us. That is such a great summary, and unfortunately, it made me want to talk about some more stuff. So we can maybe cut out, or maybe I'll just put that at the end, and we'll pretend we had this conversation beforehand. Yeah. We'll see what I think of when I'm editing this. I don't know.
Do it in 3 different takes, and then mix up the takes in editing.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Confuse
perfect.
the audience.
Perfect. No, all I was gonna say, like, you both made great points there, and I do think it leads to like an interesting thematic thing about like red flag movies in general, which is like, can a movie really be a red flag movie just for having red flag content? And we actually kind of talked about this last week with Call Me By Your Name.
Yeah.
And we were saying how with that movie, like, obviously there is like the grooming elements to it, and the movie doesn't ever really explicitly take a stance on grooming, and that's why it's so difficult to consume that. Whereas I think the sort of the key line, and why I find this one of the tamer red flag movies, I guess is a good way of putting it, is because I think the intent from the creators is so clear. Absolutely. That this is all fucked. And that's what, like, intent-wise, it drops it, and then, then it just leads to, if you have no media literacy and you're watching this movie, or if you have media literacy and you're just a deplorable human being, and you're watching this movie and empathizing with Patrick Bateman, then, I can't do anything for you.
I'd like to just clarify my red flag stance, too.
Yeah.
I think what I mean is, for the most part, like, it's not... the red flag stuff doesn't come from the existence of the movie. This is a case where it comes from the fan base.
Exactly, yeah.
This is a real case of the fan base tainting a piece of work. Like, we've seen it all before with various things, and I think this is a quintessential example of
yes,
that.
exactly. And I do think also it is very much the reverse of... We've talked about how it's like when a group of people gang up on a movie because they're sexist or homophobic or racist, and then you also end up not liking that movie, but for none of those reasons, and you feel horrible being like, I don't like this movie, wait, like, not for that. This is like the opposite of that, where it's like all these
like
shitty
this
people...
movie, but...
Wait, and that leads into my final red flag topic question that we're going to end all these episodes on, and it's
I wish
for you,
we had video
Carol.
episodes. There's been so much of Marco tying and untying fake bows around his head.
Okay, this one's for you, because Dan and I are both straight, and we can't answer this question.
Okay.
The question is, Carolina,
Sure.
and I'm going to ask you this at the end of every red flag movie, okay?
Hilarious.
If you were on a date with a guy, and they were like, American Psycho, love that movie. What elements would need to be present for you to not consider that an immediate red flag? Or is there no element and it would be an immediate red flag regardless?
That's a
Sure.
good question.
I think I will say if this is his number one favorite movie of all time, for whatever reason, I'd probably end it. But I'm
Okay.
also kind of a snob in the way where, like, I do make it a priority to ask every person I date, like, their interest in movies and music really early on. And if there's absolutely no overlapping of our Venn diagrams,
Sure.
I usually cut it off after that.
That's fair.
So I think if this is his number one favorite movie of all time, it means he hasn't watched enough movies. So that probably would be enough. But if it is a movie he maybe lists amongst a series of other films, then I would try to ask him how he feels about, like, women and women's rights, and capitalism,
Yeah.
What are your
etc.
thoughts on women?
What are your thoughts on women?
Yeah.
I think the ultimate test would be to ask him if he has a business card on him.
Ugh. Okay,
And, like,
does
if he
anyone
does-
ever really have a business card these days?
What if he
Every
whips out-
company I've been to has given me business cards.
Do they have
Really?
those metallic business card holders that they whip out? Like,
Yeah, I nobody has those anymore. That's
Yeah.
nobody fucking
That
has.
would be a
But
big red flag.
you'd be surprised. People do have business cards still.
Huh.
Nobody uses them, but everyone has them. They just print them for some reason.
I
Keep
think
fucking
it's just
Vista
because
printing.
most people in Ottawa are government workers, and there's really no
Right.
reason for them to have one.
Yeah.
because everyone knows who they are.
Yeah. They all have their own little hive of people. I haven't met a non-government worker in so long.
That's hilarious.
But that's a wonderful question. I'm excited to answer it every time.
I look forward to it.
But yeah, this one can be explained away. I can get over this one
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's generally where we're all at with this
Yeah.
one. Like, it is just the inverse of, the other thing. I'm just like, I like it, wait,
Yeah.
I'm not a piece of
Absolutely.
shit.
I like it, asterisk.
I'm in on the joke of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Then you're fine.